Right, good morning, everybody.
Buenos días a todos.
Bonjour.
It's a real pleasure. If I can just ask everyone to now take their seats and we will get underway. Perfect. Well, thank you so much indeed for joining us in Washington for this year's Global Parliamentary Forum for the IMF World Bank Spring Meetings. My name is Liam Byrne. It's my honor to chair the network, and I'm absolutely delighted to be able to declare this year's Parliamentary Forum officially open. Now, we have got lots of new faces here today. So let me just sort of start by asking, who is here at the Parliamentary Forum for the first time? Oh, wow. Lots of people. Okay. And how many people here are in Washington for the first time? Okay, great. Okay, well, you're going to have a great week. And what we have tried to do as a board is put together a really stimulating couple of days. But I hope that you get to see a little bit of Washington as well as listen to some of the debates that we've got on. But really, I just wanted to say three things to kick us off. And we've got about an hour together at the beginning of this session when what we want to do is just hear a little bit from you about some of the things that you would like the Parliamentary Network to do this week, but crucially, some of the things that you would like us to do over the course of the next year. Let me just start, however, with the word of thanks, because you have travelled here this week from 78 different countries. You have come here to represent and to listen for literally hundreds of millions of people. And you've come in what is the biggest year that we have ever had for elections. 4 billion people go to the polls this year. And those elections will decide on the people and the policies that will determine some pretty big decisions over the years ahead. So I know that many people, including myself, are up for election this year. So I'm glad to tell you that there is at least one election which is now finished. And that is the election for our new board, which was elected towards the end of last year. So for those board members who are in the room, I'd love you just to stand up so that everybody can say hi. So we have my fantastic Vice Chair, Marlene Forte. We have Collins Adamoko Mensah. Is Collins here? Yeah. Great. There we go. There's Collins. We have Honourable Majara Coulibaly here, who I saw at the front. Honourable Madam Majara. We have Senator Neela Tazi from Morocco. We have Honourable Nima Lugangira from Tanzania. We've got Sven Clement from Luxembourg, who's over there. And we've got Senator Esther del Brio Gonzalez from Spain, who is there. Brilliant. So it's an amazing team, and I hope that you get a chance to say hi and work with them a little bit over the course of this week. Now, just three things by way of getting us started. So first, we need your help in making sure that our board has got a great work plan for the year. Ultimately, we're here to help make sure that you are successful in your countries in building good relationships with the World Bank and the IMF, but also helping shape those programs for the future. What we try to do over the last couple of years is innovate the way that we build Parliament to IMF World Bank relations, train people, and crucially communicate better. So we, over the last couple of years, have been creating new chapters everywhere from Ukraine to Tanzania, globally. So that is something that we would love more and more of you to do. Second, we have just put our first 28 graduates through a brilliant new program at McGill University. Now, I don't know, do we have any of the graduates from McGill here? Do you want to just stand up? Stand up if you're here. Saha's here. Sven is here. Brilliant. So Have a chat with Taha and Sven and others who have gone through the program. It's a brilliant program. It's a little bit hard work, I think you would say. We may need to sort of lighten it a little bit, but helping make sure that we have well-trained, well-connected parliamentarians around the world is something we're determined to do. And some of you may have seen the new podcast series that we've launched. That is just helping bring conversations with some of the key figures in development to you. We have now had 38 million impressions for the social media output that has gone with those podcasts. But again, we would love to hear more from you about how we make that better and stronger for the future. So that's the first point. Help us make sure that we've got a program as a board that works for you. Second, we want to make sure that we hear your voice in some of the big debates that we're having here at the IMF and the World Bank over the course of this year. So if you think about the challenges that all of us confront, it's pretty easy to be overwhelmed. We talk about the 7 giants blocking the path to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris climate targets: poverty, hunger, disease, lost learning, conflict, debt, climate change. These giants are not getting smaller. Most of them are now actually getting bigger. And yet, if we think about the prizes of the world ahead, they're extraordinary. 90% of the scientists who ever worked are alive today. The revolutions that they will author in AI, in genetic medicine, in global gigabit connectivity, in the transition to green energy, these are revolutions that could triple or increase by tenfold living standards over the course of this century. But we're all only going to get to that promise if we find better ways to share the prizes and guard each other against the perils along the way. And the international finance institutions that we created back in 1944 are amongst the most important levers that we have. Now, over the last year, they have transformed their mission, their model, their money, but we're only at the beginning of building these new foundations for new times. There are huge debates still to have about representation, about rules on everything from debt to tax, and crucially, about resources. The UN says that we need to increase to between $500 billion and $1 trillion the amount of multilateral lending that is available. So these are big tasks that we have got to perform together. And that's why your voice in that reform debate is so important. The third thing that we need your help with is making sure that you're there along the key events this year. So this is a big year in international development. We go from the spring meetings this week to the UN Summit of the Future at the end of September, to the annual meetings, and then the first big opportunity to build on these new foundations with the replenishment of IDA 21. The pledging round will be in December. It is absolutely crucial that we build the biggest IDA replenishment ever. That means richer countries coming together to mobilize something like $100 billion for development in the years ahead. So it is very easy for us to be daunted in this, but that's why the Parliamentary Network has never been as important as it is today. And that's why our relationships with you and your networks and your organizations and your parliaments have never been more important than today. So at times of challenge like this, I often quote from the words that used to be on the banners of the party that I represent. And they're the words of Isaiah. And the words go, they said, each of us, they helped everyone as their neighbor and said to their neighbor, be of good courage. That spirit of courage and solidarity is something that we need now more than ever before. And I hope this week supplies you with plenty of both. Thank you very much indeed for coming. I'm going to hand to my brilliant vice chair, and then we're going to open the floor to you for a discussion about some of the things that you would like to get out of this week and some of the things that you'd like to get out of the Parliamentary Network over the year ahead. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Liam. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It can't be that breakfast wasn't delicious. or that you're too jet lagged, I join Liam in welcoming you, our colleagues, to this Global Parliamentary Forum. I also want to commend the fund and the bank through the PN for the important work being done to enable us to gather here and to share our knowledge and experience. I want you to just pause for a moment and turn to the person next to you as a reminder to yourself and to your neighbor to say, I am here to make a positive difference. We are all here to make a positive difference. A positive difference. Whether you are an appointed or an elected parliamentarians, we are here to make a positive difference. And I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves and be reminded of that, because we generally operate in a competitive space. We overcome tremendous obstacles to get to this role of parliamentarian. So my comments is intended to focus your mind on the importance of this network and what it has been doing and what it intends to do. In spite of the fact that we come here from competitive spaces, the network is a neutral platform, and you would see that in just about every communication that you get. It is a neutral platform for partnership. It doesn't matter what we bring to the table. None of us can do it alone. It doesn't matter how qualified or how talented we are. We have to work together with someone else to make the positive difference that we have committed to. So as a neutral platform, we're here also to enhance accountability and transparency within the development cooperation work. Liam, you spoke about the words on your party banner. Well, a prime minister from my party famously said it takes cash to care. It takes cash to care. So we generally can't afford much of what needs to be done on behalf of the people that we serve. And we have to seek funding, whether through loans or grants, and of course there is tax. And whatever it is that we seek, they come with conditions. Trade-offs have to be made, and we need to know what those are. Because at the end of the day, whatever decision is taken must be in the best interest of the people we serve, and they must go towards enhancing their lives. But the network is also about empowering us as parliamentarians to share our knowledge and our experience. In Jamaica, we say that the things that unite us far exceed the things that divide us. And we should never take for granted what we can learn from each other about that common problem that we're seeking a solution to and that we're seeking to make progress on. So I invite you to use the opportunity to have the conversations. Let not the language be a barrier, because indeed our goals are common and the issues we're facing, they are common. The network seeks to enable us to hold governments and international financial institutions to account. And if you are not a front bencher, if you do not sit in the executive, you might sometimes wonder, how do I do this? Well, they say knowledge is power. It is power. Knowing what is happening, knowing the right question to ask, taking the mic, literally and metaphorically, on the backs of the people and on the shoulders of the people that we represent, to seek out an understanding and an explanation for the decisions taken. I hear people say many times that governments do not always reflect the priorities of the people, and they wonder whose interest is being represented and on whose behalf decisions are made. Colleagues, we must find what it takes to ensure that we understand how the decisions are made, how the monies are spent, how the priorities are taken. And this is what the network seeks to help us to better do. And then, as Liam said, it's about helping to shape the international agenda. And I don't know if you are like me. You sometimes wonder, so how do I do it from my constituency? How do I do it from my country? Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen, in Washington. Here we are. In another hour, we are going to have an opportunity to exchange with the heads of our institutions, the fund and the bank. And I think it's really about bringing to the various fora the knowledge that we gain when we see our people day to day. Elected representatives in particular see the people in their natural state. We see firsthand the things that impacted their lives, how the decisions taken in the high seats of government affect them. What do we do with that knowledge? Well, I tell myself that once your eyes are open to the plight of the people, then your ears and your eyes and your mouth must also be open to finding the solutions. So I am looking forward to getting to know you a little better, and I thank you for the opportunity to serve in this very important role. I can tell you that my agency has grown better for my involvement in the Parliamentary Network, and I hope that for each of you who's here for the first time, that you will devote some time to participate in the activities of the forum. Liam, what say we? And we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you as we interact and prepare for our session with Ajay and Kristalina.
So let me open up the floor. We'd love to hear from you about things that you'd like to get out of this week, issues that you would like to understand this week, arguments you would like to participate in, and things that you would like us to help organise over the course of the year. So let me just see a show of hands if people want to contribute. And because it's the first session, I'm going to have to pick on a couple of people. So let me come to you, sir. But can I just ask maybe Sahar and Sven just to say, could you just give us like a word on the McGill program, which was one of the big programs that we ran this year? Just give us a sense. Give us a sense of how that went. Whether it's something that you would recommend, whether it's one of the things that we should be trying to expand. And I'm hoping that people may have microphones so that everyone can hear you, including the translators. Do we have floor mics, people?
Yeah. Thanks, Liam, for the question.
Perfect, great.
Yes, I was one of the privileged members to attend the McGill program. It's intense, but it's very, very informative. I learned a lot, and some of the ideas and methodologies that was shared to us, I already applied in my real work, day-to-day work, and it had a positive impact on my work. And it's interesting because it has different courses that tackles different topics. It helps you also understand the international parliamentary networks, the other ones, like so you can know internationally what kind of forums are around that you maybe can also contribute to. You understand the dynamics between different parliamentaries platform. So it was very knowledgeable from an international perspective, and it was very informative on a personal skill-based course, because it enhances you as a leader, as a parliamentarian, and as a person who uses communication with constituents, whether online or offline. So overall, definitely I would recommend it to others.
Okay, that's really useful. So something we should expand perhaps for the year ahead?
I think so, yes. Yes.
Thank you. Sven?
Yes. Thank you. And I don't want to add on saying that it was great and informative, because I totally agree on that part of the discussion. Maybe let me add some thought about the program, and we should definitely expand it, because it's something that's very valuable for especially young parliamentarians, not only because of the academic background, because it helps you to grow intellectually, but also it helps you to grow your network at an early stage in your political career. which helps you to engage more proactively and probably better in international fora. If you meet people in person, and that's why meetings like these and also the program at McGill was so important, was the personal exchanges. So the residency week in Montreal was definitely part of the highlights. The remote part is obviously a lot of work. I was writing a lot, attending Zoom meetings, but the week in Montreal was probably a highlight. So we should definitely make sure that people can benefit from that experience. The second thought maybe is food for thoughts. The program is currently very Westminster style oriented, which is not the reality for most European and, as far as I understand, also a lot of African countries who have a more, a slightly different parliamentary system. And I talked to the instructor, Rick Stapenhurst, and he totally agrees that we should maybe focus it slightly differently than simply looking at the Westminster-style parliaments. But all in all, it's a great experience, and I would recommend every young MP to attend that program because it's definitely worth it.
How many young MPs have we got? I can't remember what the definition of young is. It's definitely younger than me. I'm definitely not a young MP.
Under 40, Liam, is the definition.
Okay, it's definitely.
So for you, it's slightly 1-2 days too old. Sorry.
That's very generous.
I was thinking, Liam, that not every parliamentarian will have the opportunity to go into one of the programs, but it is so important for you to take time to understand the rules of your parliament or your Congress, because that is where you become empowered. And many times it is not appreciated that when you know the rules of engagement, just how better you're able to do the work.
I think that's right. And the point that's made about the network is really useful. We have an event on Tuesday which brings young parliamentarians together. And this week, actually, you're chairing this on Tuesday, aren't you? We're bringing together
Gender.
the first global chapter on gender too.
I'm so excited. So excited.
Just trying to create some of these kind of spaces where people can build those relationships with each other is, I think,
yes,
one of the most important things we can probably do this year.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Let's take some more thoughts from the floor. Did I see? Yeah, sir.
It may be helpful to state your name and your country.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I have two small points. My name is Parmeser. I am from Suriname in the Caribbean. And then brings me to the point of you have a board, and I miss the small states in the board. Please take that into account, that small states have different challenges. That's one. Secondly, and can we work to a electronic platform to have contact with each other, not only at this meeting but after the meeting also, that we can communicate with each other. Thank you so much.
Small states.
Well, yes, and I greet you, my Surinese brother. We will work on that. I'll have a side conversation with you to hear a little bit more about your idea and how we can make it happen. But small island states or small states, Suriname not an island, important. The challenges are many, and there is a lot of information that can assist us to address the issues that we face.
May I add a point? Some small states cannot participate in these events, especially of the Caribbean small states, because it's very hard for them to raise the financial aspects. Like on the platform of ACP-AU, they have some facilities for that. Can you consider that if you want to, that those small states participate, especially, then I would suggest that. But okay, I've heard that we will talk later on this issue with Madam. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so participation budgets, electronic communications to keep people connected after these events. I think that's a very important idea. We haven't yet quite figured out how to do that yet, whether it is through platforms like LinkedIn or Slack or WhatsApp, but that's a good conversation for us to have this week. Right, yeah, sir, let me come to you, and then I'm going to come to you, sir, and then to Saha. Yeah.
Are we okay?
Yeah, good.
I'm Honorable Jume Peter from Cameroon. I would just want to suggest that during this forum, we look at this issue of how this network could help parliamentarians to go back, work very hard on what we are going to get from here in the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. You know, 2030 is at hand, and it is these SDGs that are going to help us to actually attain emergent in some of our countries. And so we would like to get some of the ideas. How can this global network help the MPs to go back and work for that? Thank you very much.
Yeah. So impact. How do we make sure that we translate meetings like this into impact? Yeah, let me come to your neighbour.
Thank you so much. My name is Elibariki Emmanuel Kingu. I'm the Member of Parliament from Tanzania. First of all, I would like to congratulate my colleague Neema for being elected as board member for this forum. Congratulations, Neema. And also, I'm so much inspired by my sister from Jamaica. As Tanzania is concerned, I would like also to convey our gratitude and appreciation for the World Bank Group and the IMF. For example, when the COVID pandemic broke in the year 2020, there were some conditions that were released by the IMF and World Bank as far as the funding on COVID, on how to tackle COVID pandemic on the year 2020. But thanks God that the World Bank and IMF was that much flexible to understand the real problems that African countries faced in order to tackle the pandemic. And the good thing, for example, for Tanzania, we had this kind of, when the country engaged to take the loans from IMF and World Bank, we had to explain to them. For example, for us, if you tell us that we have to have all those kind of schools being distributed with water, we have to accept that we are living in the world of diversity. For example, in Tanzania, we had to make sure that we make access of water to all peoples in the villages, and we managed. So through these loans, we were able to make sure that the priorities of our people are met. For example, in Tanzania, we managed to distribute water to all village through the loan that we took from the World Bank. So taking into consideration, as my sister was saying, that we cannot just engage to take loans from IMF and World Bank just without considering what are the priorities of our people. So the pandemic loan which were taken by Tanzania, COVID pandemic, really reflected the needs of our people. Roads, water and sanitation. Sometimes there's, in the schools you find students staying maybe 50 to 100. We need to add more classes so that our students are at least 40 to 50 in one class. So I'm so much happy what my sister said again. World Bank and IMF sometimes have to consider what are the priorities and needs of our people so that as parliamentarians, we can play a great role to make sure that we make the governments accountable for what is taken, because the loans which have been taken, the public have to be accountable for it. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Right, let me try and whip round a little bit faster. Saha, and then I'm going to come to there. Yeah, and there. Yeah.
Thank you, Liam. And I want to raise a point that we've seen a progress since the new president of the World Bank come in, when he first announced to have a a pause for loans for islands because of natural disasters, and then a new progress when it was announced in COP28 that the small states will also benefit from such benefits. These kind of progressive ideas and initiatives from the World Bank is very important. So building on this, I wish to see our board maybe try to work along with the leaders of the World Bank to have a new categorization of countries, not only based on GDP, because we can have another parallel categorizations by the impact of climate change, because I can be a lower middle income country, but I have heat waves and floods and other crises that makes me struggle economically, and I cannot meet my dues of paying debts or debt services. So if we can help countries based on how they are impacted, I think that will be very, very helpful for countries.
Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you. Let me come to your neighbour there.
Assalamu alaikum.
Peace be upon you.
Because my English is not good.
First of all, we would like to thank the Parliamentary Network for hosting us the second time. And I would also like to thank Mr. Liam. And I am following up in the, I am a member in the Parliamentary Network, and I am following all the updates. I want to raise two issues. First of all, the relationship between the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund with the countries facing crises. So I hope that these two institutions will give extreme importance to states that are going through economic crises or crises resulting from natural disasters, or low-income and poor countries. With respect to Algeria's experience with the International Monetary Fund, the relationship between Algeria and the IMF is opposite to the relationship between the IMF and Tanzania. So we had debts that put a burden on the treasury of Algeria. But thanks be to God, Algeria is one of the countries that has repaid in advance its debts. As for the second point, we hope, or we propose, that there could be mechanisms to come up with recommendations for meetings like these, which would raise the profile of international institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank, and same as with the United Nations, because most of the meetings of the parliaments of the world are holding meetings. And this is why I propose to have recommendations for, or emanating from these institutions, that would be widespread for all the participants. And we also hope that we can come out with a position or a stance with respect to countries living in tensions, especially in the Middle East. And we hope that we can come out with a position regarding the Palestinian cause, because we know that last year the Parliamentary Network issued a stance in support of Ukraine. And we hope that this year Palestine will get its share of the position or the stance. And also, with respect to what happened recently, we call upon all parties to exercise reason and to give priority to reason, because war will not benefit any side. And for us, humans everywhere have the same value. And this is what I wanted to express with respect to international peace and with respect to the relationship that could be improved by the or the improvement of the relations between these financial institutions and development institutions and vulnerable states and poor states. Thank you, and God's blessings be upon you.
Kosovo, and then I'm going to come back here. Right, right, if people are brief, I'll get everybody in.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing us together. Always a pleasure to share from our experience, but also to learn from the others. So in regard to your question, what would we expect from today? I think that in the context of these meetings, there are some interesting points that are covered as public debt and debt crisis. Currently in Kosovo, we have the lowest level of public debt in Europe, around 17.2% of GDP, which is relatively low. But we would be very keen in learning from the experience of the others, but also the possibility of maximizing this further as a financing opportunity. But also the other hot topic, which is also climate change and energy transition, green energy. This provides, and it's a cost for a lot of countries, and it's a cost that will be shared with the citizens. And considering the fact that our economies are very different, we have also to consider the impact of how this is going to affect also poverty within such countries, because it would be an additional burden. And how are we going to prepare the labor force as well? Because this would require new skills and adapting the schooling system and the curricula to these new skills required. So I think this would be also interesting.
That's super helpful, thank you. And we've got good sessions on climate finance and indeed the impact of AI over the course of this week. Right, let me come down to the front. Uruguay, thank you.
Buenos días, voy a hablar en español. Mi nombre es Beatriz.
Good morning. I'm from Uruguay. I'm Speaker of the General Assembly of my country. Uruguay is a country where we have stable democracy, and we've managed to recover from the effects suffered from the pandemic, as all the other countries. Given the reason why we're convening here today, first of all, I would like to thank everyone, because today is the first time that Uruguay participates in this network. It's truly important to be part of these events, this type of event. It's very interesting to participate here with Tulia, reflecting about what's coming up. And what I thought was so important to express here, having listened to my colleagues, is precisely the following. The new agenda that we need to foster that has to do with technology, we need to address climate change, how this new technology is going to affect employment, the educational transformation that we need, the reskilling that is needed also, and so on and so forth. As we address this new agenda, and this is happening at an accelerated time, we need to understand that we need to respond faster, and that's a challenge that we have as MPs, and we need to respond to our societies more swiftly. But my concern, as a colleague was saying, is that we need to think as parliamentaries, as representatives of our citizens, and we need to understand the implications in terms of poverty levels in our respective countries. And if you allow me to do so, poverty affects specifically women and children. Therefore, this meeting, organized by the World Bank as well as the IMF, is truly important. We need to understand the challenges that we will be facing. We need to make sure that international financial organizations understand the reality that we are facing, because there are differences from country to country. My colleagues mentioned it, but we also have some common ground, some commonalities. The technological changes that we are implementing will take us to big transformations, and they will have an impact on our budget. At the same time, we need to have the right measures in place to make sure that we don't leave anyone behind in this transformation process. So on top of my appreciation, I also wanted to express my concerns about how we, as representatives of our peoples, will have to promote this transformation in order to follow an international agenda. But at the same time, on the other hand, we need to understand that these challenges will demand of certain policies to contain them, to contain these challenges, and also other policies that help us address the realities in our different countries.
Right, let me go to Senegal. Thank you for your patience. Spain, yeah.
Greetings, Liam. Thank you for giving me the floor on this very important opportunity, given what the Parliamentary Network does with the IMF and the World Bank. My greetings to the member of the Bureau and the member of the Council that have been appointed. What I need to say is that much has been done, yet much remains to be done in terms of the dynamics of the network. With all the meetings we have held virtually, in person, and even during the last general meetings in Marrakesh, when we talk about accountability and transparency and public policies that are defined in our countries, there is always this issue of access of parliamentaries to the relationship between the IMF and the World Bank. We do not always have these access. We are all here, parliamentarians, but when projects and programs are signed, parliamentarians are often not present. So we need a closer cooperation, an involvement of the network so they can be present. Another thing, public policies indeed are here. There are the needs of the populations that may be different from the visions of the political leadership. So we need the support of the networks we know that at the national level, networks do not have that much of that many resources. So sometimes it's hard for us to come to these meetings. We need to come and participate. We've been here for years. Another point, if I may, regarding climate change. As you said, there will be a special session on it. But today, we said that the World Bank is going to have the funds in terms of losses and damages. How can the parliamentarians have access to it? We're talking about the vulnerabilities of the countries. There is also the very accessibility to these funds, the access to these funds. It is difficult given how slow the access can be. It is hard for us to get the funds in time to meet the needs, particularly in the health sector, which is tremendously vulnerable. And again, in terms of public health. So what I would like is for us today to try and focus on finding a clear response with the World Bank so that we can have access to these funds and operate on the loss and damages that we incur due to the climate change.
Like straight to the back, and then I'm going to let me try and do my best to get.
That's me?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then,
I'm Danielle Heers from the Netherlands, Dutch Parliament.
Keep the signs up just so I can help bring you in. But go on, go Netherlands.
Go Netherlands. Okay, here we go. I just would like to know a bit more about how we can be better informed about the reforms that are ongoing on in the World Bank and IMF, and the talks and the dilemmas that are coming up, especially related to the questions that have also been raised by various people here, like climate change, like the face of poverty is the face of a woman, and the thoughts from the bank and IMF in relation to its lending practices in that sense. And in general, how the parliamentarians can be better informed about that, and what our role would be in the view of those institutions in being part of those reforms and the talks about those.
Yeah,
reforms.
perfect. That is a big agenda. Right, Ghana.
Bonjour, je vais m'exprimer en français.
Allow me to speak in French. Thank you. I am
C'est un honorable député Sokhna Ba du Sénégal, la plus jeune députée.
I am the youngest national deputy of Senegal.
Go, please.
Ghana.
Thank you very much. The point I really want to bring to our attention is the fact that we as parliamentarians and as this group, we need to be able to respond to the new mission of the World Bank. The World Bank has changed her mission to poverty reduction in a livable world. I think that we need to be able to have a working group on climate finance, especially when a lot of us are coming from climate vulnerable countries where debt distress is impeding our progress in climate action. So we as parliamentarians need to have a working group that will look at climate finance, especially in the context of debt sustainability. And that's something I think we should be able to set up a group to do. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Suriname, thank you for your patience. Sorry, Senegal, my apologies.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I am the Honorable Cernaba. I am the youngest member of the National Assembly. Allow me first and foremost to thank you for this activity. Please, thank you for having invited us. I have a question on cooperation. Is there a cooperation between the global parliamentary networks and the other parliamentary networks at the regional level, in particular on issues that have to do with poverty, equity, and climate? If such is the case, how can the parliamentarians from the various countries how can they secure this cooperation amongst countries? Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Let me come to Spain, and then Liberia, and then Bolivia, and then I'm going to wrap it up.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Javier Maroto. I'm the Vice President of the Spanish Senate. And I just wanted to say that we cannot talk about sustainability or economical growth without talking about the risk of the war. Putin, I think, is the pink elephant in the room, but we should talk about it also. What if Ukraine don't win this war, doesn't win the war? Which is next step? Everybody knows that Finland and Sweden, being neutral for decades, had decided to join the NATO. What's happening to countries like Georgia in the south part of Russia? They are feeling very, very scared, because they are not members of the European Union, neither the NATO. So if the risk of the threats and illegal invasions of Putin still continue, I think we have a terrible trouble not only in Europe and in the whole world. And we're talking about citizens, we are talking about freedom, economy, sustainability. There is no debate without talking about this real trouble, and it's the Russian attitude of Mr. Putin right now.
Perfect, I got that point. Thank you. Now, did I see Bolivia? Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Ta Wongwe from Liberia.
Quickly, and then we're going to need to wrap up.
I believe this network is one of the most important networks we have globally. because this represents truly almost every single country that has some level of parliament. And I believe it would be important if we could establish some of those regional networks. In West Africa, we have the ECOWAS Parliament that really put forward policies and other agenda that we all tackle in our local countries. If we could establish those, I know you have country-based chapters, but if we could look at regional chapters that could set some agenda and policies that could bring the recommendations to the bigger bodies. As my colleague from Ghana stated, we come from different environments. Yeah. It would be important for us to establish those regional networks that could liaise, meet, put forth recommendations to the bigger body. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Right, thank you very much. Now, we've now got you all nice and warmed up, which was exactly what we were trying to do in this session. The clock is against us, so let me hand over to Marlene now just to try and do a heroic job of summing up what was a brilliant conversation. But keep the ideas coming. We've got a couple of days together now. We're about to hear from both Jay and Julie from the bank and the IMF on some of the messages from this week. But keep talking to us as a board over the course of the week, and we will do our best to issue that work plan as quickly as we can thereafter. But Marlene, that was a brilliant discussion.
It was. Thank you, everyone. I think the common thread through all of the contributions is the need to empower parliamentarians to do their work a little better. So I'm going to take the liberty to make 3 suggestions. And the first, I touched on before, is to familiarize yourself with your parliamentary system. Do not underestimate the difference that this makes. A lot of parliamentarians do not know the rules. They don't know how decisions are taken and how they can be influenced within the parliamentary system. So when you talk about accessing the programs, accessing the funds, it's important to remember that the access is done at the member country level and at the country level, not at the parliamentary level. So the next suggestion is to take time to familiarize yourself with the programs and the instruments of the bank. Jamaica, for example, accessed the RSF, and it enabled us to make important changes that mainstream climate conditions in assessing programs and in determining the priorities for capital expenditure. So take time to familiarize yourself with the instruments. We are in the digital age. A lot of the information is available online. And the third thing, I want you to walk away from this year's Global Parliamentary Forum with the power of the brand. So I'm going to suggest that using the name of the network, that you seek out a meeting with your Minister of Finance. Now, if you happen to be from the same party as your Minister of Finance, it may be less difficult. It's not necessarily easy. I didn't say easy, it may be less difficult. And if you're from the other side, it's more difficult. But you can say that I attended the Global Parliamentary Forum, and critical to my doing the work a little better is understanding how you operate. So spend a little time. Perhaps you could get a little group together. So instead of the one-on-one, time is precious. And then there is a country rep for the bank, from the bank and the fund to almost all of our countries. Take a little time to seek out a meeting with your country rep and have some exchange. You'd be amazed at the difference it will make in empowering you.
Brilliant. Right. Thank you very much. That concludes our first session. We're going to just go and grab our next guests to bring them on stage and introduce them to you. But give yourselves a huge round of applause. That was a brilliant discussion, and that's given us a flying start. Thanks very much. And we'll be back in 2 moments. Right. I knew this would happen. Once we put you in a room together, everyone will just start talking to each other. So let me try and get the next session underway now. So if I can try and bring you to order. And I may need to draw on the help of many of the other speakers that we've got in the room in imposing some discipline and asking you to take your seats. Okay, right, so the next session's about to begin. So if I can ask everybody to now take their seats. Folks at the front, if you can now take your seats, that would be amazing. Sorry, colleagues standing up, chatting in the middle there. Spain, colleague from Spain, Vice President of the Senate. If I can ask you to take your seat now, that will help me get this session underway. Thank you very much indeed. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm keen that we get a chance to hear from two of our special guests this week before we hear from the President of the World Bank and the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund. So I'd be really grateful if you can join me in welcoming onto the stage Jay Heimbach and Julie Kosak from the World Bank and the IMF. Perfect. So, Jay, congratulations. Reasonably new in role, and I think this must be your first spring meetings. Is that right? You've done annual meetings, but this is the first. This is the first spring meetings.
This is the first spring meetings. Yes.
Okay. Perfect. And Julie, you're just now an old hand at this.
Yes, just second spring meetings.
Second spring meetings. Yeah. So just in the time we've got, give us a sense of. What are the key things that you think people will hear from the spring meetings this week? Jay, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you. And first off, thank you for having us. And it's an honor to sit in front of you all. I've spent my entire career working with Congress and parliaments. So this is a very distinguished audience to get to address, also fairly intimidating. But I would say what the bank is going to try and convey over the next 5 days is our general theme of from vision to impact. So as you noted, I started 6 months ago, just about to the day. My first engagement actually with the World Bank was at the Parliamentary Forum in Morocco. So this has kind of become a trend for me. But there, Ajay laid out a new vision for the bank, a world free of poverty on a livable planet. And so what we have been doing since that is working on making the bank a better bank, working on efficiencies, engagements, partnerships, scaling things up. And so what we hope to show you over the next several days is what we've been doing and what that means for our ambition.
Perfect. And Julie, from the fund's point of view, what are the key things you think parliamentarians will hear from the fund's leadership this week?
All right. Very good. So thanks also for having me again. It's always a pleasure to address this audience. I think from the fund, there are maybe four big messages that we will be discussing this week. First is a more near-term message, and it is that, despite all of the big economic shocks that the world has experienced over the last several years, including geopolitical tensions, and we've certainly seen some shocks over the last weekend, that the global economy has actually proven to be remarkably resilient at the global level. That's kind of the first overarching message. But the second message is that within that resilience, we see a very significant amount of divergence. So we see, for example, the US economy having already exceeded its pre-pandemic trend for economic growth. We see emerging markets falling behind that pre-pandemic trend, and very worryingly, low-income countries are faring the worst in terms of their catching up to this pre-pandemic trend. So we're very concerned about this divergence in fortunes, and that is a theme that you will hear from us this week. Now, two ways to hopefully address this divergence. One is a focus on the medium term. So what is it that we need to do to lift growth in the medium term, to lift living standards in the medium term? What we have found in our analysis is that weak productivity growth is a big driver of a weak medium-term growth outlook, and potentially a driver for some of this divergence. So how do we address how do we get to the core? And this means reforms and policies. And there's obviously a big role for parliamentarians to play in advancing and supporting those reforms. And of course, the other very important ingredient in this recipe of how are we going to do better globally is the need for international cooperation. And so you will certainly hear that continued call from us this week.
Brilliant. And Jay, given this divergence that Julie highlights between low-income countries and richer nations, many of those low-income countries will be in Africa. So I think we will probably hear a fair bit about Africa this week. And of course, one of the most remarkable things over the last year has been the rebuilding of the foundations of the IMF and the World Bank. But we've now got to build on those foundations with a big IDA replenishment towards the end of the year.
And over 50 elections at the same time, too.
At the same time, yeah.
So we like a challenge, I guess, right? Yeah, you will hear a lot about Africa. In fact, one of our two flagship events is focused on energy in Africa, knowing what a critical issue that is. Yeah, and the reforming agenda continues. It will take time. It will take patience. It will take parliamentarians understanding what it is we're doing, how we're doing it. So partnering with you on these issues will be critical for us. And we will do this in context of IDA at the same time. So it's a lot on the plate.
And as richer countries begin thinking about IDA, I think some of the themes are now becoming clear with IDA. But what can parliamentarians begin doing amidst all of the elections to begin raising the profile of IDA now, do you think?
Well, that's a great question. I think one of the things that we want to do with our partnering with all of you is to make sure that you have a good understanding of where it is that your investments are going. We view IDA as a safe repository for money that is being sent to help transform the countries that need it the most. But the best way to do that is to demonstrate things to you. So we have offices in 130 countries around the world. We'd highly encourage you to engage with us. We can give you data, share best practices. We can take you on field visits, answer questions. But the more you understand us, the easier it is for you to talk to your colleagues and governments and help us do this work. So I think the deeper the partnership we can have together, the more successful we can be in tackling some of these challenges.
And Marlene, this relates to something that you were saying earlier about how what part of the challenge for parliamentarians is actually being able to demonstrate impact to the people that we serve.
I'm particularly interested in the importance of the reforms that will enable the outcomes. And it will be reforms in policies where parliamentarians are not usually in the policy space because those are executive decisions. But under our parliamentary system, and I'm referring particularly to the Westminster, but I think the same may be true for other systems, is that your executive is accountable to your parliament for the policy decisions taken. We are missing that accountability in the parliamentary space. So you will only be able to participate in the kind of reforms that lead to the better outcome when you know. And I think a single theme that will emerge from this meeting is the critical importance of parliamentarians gaining a better understanding of what is happening so that their role can impact the decisions being made as we access the funds for outcome.
So, Julie, what do you think you need to hear from parliamentarians this week? What's the most valuable feedback that we can provide you with over the next kind of couple of days that we're in town?
Yeah, great question. And I think we are looking to hear from parliamentarians, I think, on a range of issues. First, does our analysis, does our assessment of, global trends, of divergence, of a weak outlook for growth over the medium term, and underpinning that, a need for reforms, also what we are calling a shock-prone world, a world where there is increasing climate shocks, of rapid technological advancement, right? The dawn of AI, and how are we going to grapple with these trends? Are those, I think it would be super useful for us to hear from you, are those themes resonating with you? Right? Is that, are we placing our emphasis and our concern on areas that are resonating with you? And if not, are we missing anything? And if so, what is it? I think the other thing it would be very useful for us to hear is how, there's a big agenda, right? There's a lot of things that can be done and need to be done to make our world and individual countries more resilient. And there's many things that we can do together as a group through international cooperation, and many things need to be done, though, also at the individual country level. So, what are your priorities? How are you seeing those priorities? And then maybe picking up a little bit on the discussion about the IDA replenishment. We have, when we were at the annual meetings in Morocco, we reached two important milestones. One is we reached our shareholders, our members, our member countries reached an agreement on an increase in what we call our quotas. It's essentially the permanent resources of the IMF. But in many cases, though, those decisions need to be ratified by parliaments. So your support is going to be essential to ensuring that the IMF has a strong financial foundation. We also reached a milestone for fundraising for our instrument for low-income countries. And yet we see very, very strong demand from our low-income members for more financial support. So, ensuring that parliamentarians understand the importance of this instrument and its financing, and for some countries, what can be done to help strengthen that instrument as well.
So, Julia, on this issue of the financing for low-income countries, what I hear from colleagues is that the fund need to continue to think about how countries are categorized, because some may not fall technically in the low-income country, but when you look on what is available by way of their spend, either because of the debt to GDP ratio or other things that are impacting the resources, they are sometimes worse off than the low-income countries, but are not able to access the funding that are stipulated primarily for low-income. So I'm suggesting that be taken back for part of the consideration of resonance on the issues.
Yeah, and maybe if I can just speak briefly to that. So we have we have made some progress in this area, right? So we have a new instrument called the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. And this new instrument is aimed at low-income countries, but also vulnerable middle-income countries. And the idea is, I think, to make at least a step in that direction.
Indeed.
And having said that, we recognize that probably more needs to be done in this area. And this, again, would be a wonderful opportunity for us to hear from you. How can we do more in this area? What would be most useful? What are the areas where you would like to see us up our game?
But these are big shifts, aren't they? I mean, the quota increase is a 50% quota increase. That's about $320 billion. The rechanneling of special drawing rights, that's $100 billion. I mean, these are quite big numbers.
They are big numbers. So just to maybe say on the SDR channeling, when we step back and look in the midst of the pandemic, the IMF had a $650 billion SDR allocation. But given the way our financial structure is designed, most of those SDRs went to countries that don't really need them. They went to wealthy countries. So we created something called SDR channeling, whereby the wealthy countries could take their SDRs and through the IMF, and ultimately maybe through an expanded set of options, can channel those SDRs so that they reach the countries that really need the support. And so far, we have reached our milestone, our target of $100 billion of SDR channeling. Much of that has gone to this Resilience and Sustainability Facility and also our low-income lending. So those SDRs are being put to use. But of course, there's always more that we can do. And we continue to call for more use of those SDRs so that the money gets to where it's needed most.
Liam, if I may, we have a number of new parliamentarians in the room, and some may not know what we're talking about when you speak of the SDRs and the quota. So as simply as possible and as succinctly as possible, just to empower them, because I can see them going back home to say, you know what? I kind of know how the allocations are made and how much is my country can get on the programs. So,
okay, so I'll try to be very brief, but I'll also, I think my team will be here working with you over the next couple of days, and so you will have resources here to ask further questions. So just very briefly, the IMF's structure is such that when a country joins the IMF, it is assigned a quota, a share in the IMF's overall financial resources. And that share determines many things: voting power, also borrowing capacity. So when we say we're increasing the quotas by 50%, it means that we will go to the membership has agreed this. So that means each member would be asked to put in the additional 50% in its own currency into the bigger pot of the IMF. And we pool those resources, and then we're able to lend them out if a country falls into difficulty. So that's what the quotas are. They're kind of like equity capital, or it's your shareholding. It's your percentage of shareholding in the IMF. And then the SDR is a unit of account that we use at the IMF. It's called special drawing right. But it's also a basket of currencies. It's made up of 5 currencies: the US dollar, the euro, the UK pound, the Japanese yen, and the Chinese renminbi. And the SDR so it is a unit of account. It's also reflecting of the 5 major currencies. And when the IMF is able to actually issue SDRs, and that is what we did in 2001. We issued $650 billion in SDRs, and they went directly to the member countries in relation to their quota share. And that's why, because the larger, richer countries have a higher quota share, much of the SDRs went to them.
Perfect. Jay, 1 minute. What do you want to hear from parliamentarians this week?
1 minute. Wow, that's tough. I think what it is a better understanding of your operating environments and your needs. How can we be better partners to you? How can we help you? Your work, I will say, it's incredible. Like, we work on a set of issues. Your phones ring. It could be anything under the sun, from the smallest of things to the biggest of things. So in the spaces where we work together, understanding what you need, how you need it, how we talk about it to you. Is there specific data? Are there specific issues that you'd like to partner in? Are there things that we're doing that you think, that's not great, we'd love to try something else? That's all incredibly useful information for us. I mean, we all have to work together on these problems. You mentioned earlier, Liam, those are big numbers. They are big numbers. We have big problems to solve. But one of the things we will stress over the next week and going forward, and we have since Morocco, is the importance of partnerships and crowding in its governments, its CSOs and NGOs, it's the private sector. We have to get everybody's shoulder to the wheel if we really want to make some progress on some of these issues. So your ideas, thoughts, critiques, it's all welcome.
Perfect. Right, our time is short. The clock is against us. Jay, Julie, thank you so much indeed for joining us, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and looking forward to seeing you over the course of the week. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right, that sets the stage now for our next session. We will just go and grab our guests. So don't move, don't go anywhere, because we're now just about to start our town hall with AJ Banga and Kristalina Georgieva. Right, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. I'm absolutely delighted to be able to open this year's town hall session of the 2024 Spring Meetings Global Parliamentary Forum. So would you please join me in welcoming on stage the President of the World Bank, Ajay Banga, and the Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva. Wonderful. Well, I'm hoping that one year we may be able to organise these town halls when we don't have the backdrop of an international crisis. But maybe one day that will come. But let me start by saying, Kristalina, a huge congratulations to you on your appointment for a second 5-year term. You have many supporters and admirers in this room, and that news was tremendously well received. And Ajay, a huge congratulations to you for what has been a flying start as President of the World Bank. The presentation that you gave at the end of the last week, I have to say, was a masterclass in how fast you've moved to begin building a better bank. We'll have lots of questions here about a bigger bank as well. But yes. But for many of us who are fighting elections this year, and we're trying to win the votes of 4 billion people this year, we're going to be fighting for issues and representatives to help make some pretty big decisions over the year to come. And we talk about 7 giants blocking the road towards achieving the SDGs and the Paris climate change. And those giants are getting bigger: poverty, hunger, disease, lost learning, debt, climate change, conflict, all becoming harder and harder and harder. But Kristalina, you made a brilliant speech at Cambridge a couple of months ago about the economic prospects for your grandchildren, and congratulations on becoming a grandfather for a second time, I think. But you talked about a century ahead where living standards could either increase 3-fold or 9-fold if we make good decisions. But getting reform of international financial institutions right is critical to achieving that future. And both of you have transformed the mission, the model, the money of your organisations over the last period. You've built a new foundation, and it feels like we've now got to build a bigger, stronger house for the years to come. So that's some of the debate that we'd like to get into, and Marlene's going to kick us off with a couple of questions to get the conversation started.
Thank you. So my question is directed to both of you, starting with you, Ajay. As you welcome a new grandchild, we're reminded that the world is facing many, many challenges. What's foremost on your mind at this time?
Aside from the challenges that Liam started out with, which is global crises that are confronting us in geopolitics as well. First of all, thank you all for being here, and you should know that both of us count on support from all of you for us to do what we do. And it doesn't work one way unless you're part of this. So I want to start by thanking you for being here with us this morning. To me, the issue that Liam just got going to, Marlene, which is the interlocking, intertwined challenges of poverty, of climate, of health, of food insecurity, of fragility, conflict, and violence. I think that the willingness to believe that these are interlocked and intertwined, that you cannot solve for poverty without solving for some of these, that the ability to put them into neat little compartments is not a luxury that we have in our time. I think that's a critical part of understanding what challenges we are dealing with. The second part of this is that I think time is of the essence. There's 1.1 billion young people coming off job age in the global south in the coming 10 to 12 years. Currently, the same countries are on a pathway to generate 325 million jobs. So that number might be wrong by some number, but the fact is it's not 1.1 billion. And there's a large gap. And I think that, to me, lends a sense of urgency to the issue to ensure that young people who could be our demographic dividend are genuinely capable of being that dividend through their quality of life when they're growing up, but then the ability to have a good job, because that gives them both earning but dignity when they're older. And I think that's an important part of this topic. I think I want you to know that forecasts are not destiny. So I believe that we can change things, but this is the current forecast. I think the third part of this that worries me a little bit is the fact that we need to find a way to get this so-called better bank that we're working on, get that work done, get it behind us, and hopefully we'll talk about that, but then get to scalability and replicability so we can build impact on these issues. And I think the scalability and replicability is an important part of what you'll hear during this spring meeting. In this particular spring meeting, we are focused on two topics: getting access to energy, power in Africa, and secondly, healthcare, better healthcare across the world. And I don't want to preempt the announcements, but these are large commitments we are making as an institution. And the idea is to put ourselves out there for scale and replicability. So that's what I would do. Intertwined challenges, time is of the essence, get to scale and replicability.
Indeed, indeed. Kristalina, what's on your mind?
What has been making me lose sleep over the last years is still with us. One, unexpected shocks that hit the world, but especially the most vulnerable people and the most vulnerable countries. Second, the fact that the world economy may be stable, but it is not working on four cylinders. Well, actually, since we are abandoning fossil fuels, it is not speeding up as much as we need it to. Let me talk a bit about those two challenges and what we hope to achieve during the spring meetings with the membership to mobilize to face them. The shock after shock after shock that we have experienced has, of course, left scarring. We just reassessed what is the size of this scarring. $3.3 trillion less for our world to share because of these shocks. Good news, it is smaller than we initially projected it may be. Very bad news, where we have upgraded our projections. In other words, it's more low-income countries. And when we look at the juncture right now, tomorrow we will publish our projections for the global outlook. They would tell us that growth is holding. Actually, our projection would be slightly better than it was last time around. They would tell us inflation is going down, but they also would tell us we have the lowest growth in decades projected for the next 5 years. It would tell us that inflation is not quite yet done. I'm sure you have heard about this soft landing. Well, we haven't landed just yet. So fasten your seatbelt. It is still to come. And it would tell us that the main reason why growth projections are so weak is low productivity across the world. Low productivity, low growth. We also know that we have exhausted our fiscal capacity to respond to this shock after shock after shock. So here is a huge challenge for our members. They have to rebuild this fiscal capacity so they can handle the shocks to come, but do so at the time when, as you said in the beginning, half of the world is going to vote. It's very hard. Fiscal is hard, but even harder when we are in elections. And they have to do it when pressure to invest in people, in digital infrastructure, is very high. So what does it mean for the membership? What does it mean for the fund? Number one, we have a huge obligation to provide our members with the best possible analysis and advice, and it has to be country-specific. Why? Because no more we are in a world when the challenges are all the same for everybody. Remember when COVID hit? Everybody in the same place. Monetary policy accommodation, fiscal policy accommodation. Now countries are in a different place, so we need to provide country-specific advice. Number two, we need to bring price stability if we want growth to be revitalized. Number three, we are arguing that countries can have medium-term fiscal frameworks that are not suffocating through cut in a kind of a shot now, but give us a projection over time. And number three, invest in what can lift up productivity in human capital, in critical infrastructure, and of course in climate resilience. And I think for us at the fund, I heard that there are many new people. New people, you haven't been here before, raise your hand. Well, first, welcome, welcome, welcome. And second, I want to say that those of you who are new, you need to recognize that our institutions, the bank and the fund, over the last years, really have stepped up. We, at the fund, we have injected $1 trillion in reserves and liquidity to buffer the world economy. We have reformed our financial capacity by getting last year 50% quota increase. And we are reforming our lending instruments for low-income countries and for climate big time. But the world needs so much more. We need you to help us to be the best we can possibly be. So please, when you are in your parliaments and there is a bill that would strengthen the fiscal position of your country, that would strengthen the capacity of our institutions to serve you, vote yes. Thank you.
So, and if you can do it and get re-elected afterwards, you just let us know how you did that. So now, Ajay, you've had a flying start, not even a year in post, and people like me, politicians who argue for a bigger bank, but the priority has been on building a better bank first. Just give us a sense of some of the big changes that you've already got underway. And you mentioned a little bit about you wanted to get this kind of bank reform piece done so that we can start actually mobilizing and gearing up. But just give us a quick update on work to date.
So, Liam, my view of the better bank and then the bigger bank was caused by the fact that if you don't fix the bank to be what you want it to be, asking you for more money is probably not the best thing I'm doing. And so I've been very disciplined, even though I fear for the issue of inadequate resources more than any of you probably understand when looking at me. I'm petrified of that topic, but I believe you cannot put the cart before the horse. So that's why I've been focusing on better. So what am I trying to do with better? Give you a few examples. The first is speed. It used to take 19 months for us to go from starting work on a project to the time it got approved by the board. And I think 19 months is kind of long. So we're trying to bring it down to 12 by the middle of next year, which means I got to take 6 or 7 months off it. I've already got 3 off it as we speak. I've got 3 to 4 more to go. It's going to get harder as we go along, but there's good practical work being done by really good people in the bank to bring 19 down to 12 with part of the work done first. Second, simplicity. A lot of our clients, governments, receiving governments in particular, complained about the fact that the bank was complicated to deal with. So countries that are only IDA dependent, the ones that receive maximum grants and deeply concessional money, versus those that were mixed between IDA and IBRD and also had the private sector coming in through IFC, ended up dealing with 3 different parts of the bank, with 3 different processes, with different methods. The first thing we're doing, 20 countries as of 1st July, 1 country representative, combining across these. So you as a client, you as a government, you don't have to worry about dealing with our silos. That's our problem. And we will bring 1 person to you to represent the whole institution across solutions that demand both public money, your own government money, as well as private sector money, as compared to making you deal with all 3. A third one has to do with the vision and mission of the bank. Getting the vision of the bank to go beyond poverty and shared prosperity to include livable planet means that we can widen the aperture of the bank to work on those intertwined challenges we started talking about. Now, how do we actually stand up for them? So I'll give you a small example. COP last year, let's talk climate. In COP 28, I said we're going to get to 45% of our financing going towards climate in 2025. We're already running at about 35. So to get to 45 is a fair ambition, but we think we can get there. I'm not talking about 2030, I'm talking about next year. But importantly, only half of that for mitigation, as in energy emissions, and the other half for adaptation, to deal with the downstream impact of what energy emissions are doing to many of the countries in this room. So what do I mean by adaptation? Heat-resistant varieties of seeds, drip irrigation, hurricane-resistant schools, roads that will survive a catastrophe better. Those kinds of things, what I call smart development. I'm not taking away from schools and hospitals for climate. That half of adaptation is schools and hospitals done the right way for the reality of our time, which is climate catastrophes are visiting all of us more frequently than we would like them to be. And I think that's the kind of thing I'm trying to do practical things with. Then, trying to get to a corporate scorecard. Our corporate scorecard, how we measured ourselves, had 2 issues. The first is it was built on inputs, meaning how many dollars, how many projects. I want to move to how many girls went to school, how many carbon tax emissions, how many carbon tons we avoided, how many people got a better job because of a skilling institute, as compared to dollars and projects only. I want to measure dollars and projects, but I want to measure output. Second, we had 153 items in our corporate scorecard. For those of you who have worked anywhere in your life, when you have 153 items, there's enough there for you to always get an A grade. We're down to 22 approved by our board. We will measure ourselves on 22. And those 22 connect directly to those intertwined challenges, things like the SDGs. All that is what we're looking at, down to 22. So the idea is to get to hold our feet to the fire, fewer items, output-oriented, not just input. And then the last real part is how do we get this done? And I think there we've got to do 2 more things. One is take our knowledge. We are a money bank, but we're also a knowledge bank. And I think our knowledge is unbelievably useful to countries who do not have the capacity. Many of those impacted in the worst lower income categories are those who don't have that capacity. We have people trained and knowledgeable subject matter experts in all these topics. We can bring their knowledge to you right from the time we do a country framework to the time we help create bankable projects to the time we help build capacity on implementation. We've taken our knowledge bank and put them into 5 verticals: people, prosperity, planet, infrastructure, and digital. That starts with human capital, talks about how to make that human capital get to prosperity, cares about the planet we're on, including soil conditions and water and forestry and biodiversity and adaptation, not just energy emissions. And then infrastructure, without which we cannot make progress, and digital. And I peeled digital out because I believe digital is the great leveler that we should all be focusing on, if it's handled well. So that's a series of things we're trying to do. We're also doing things around capital adequacy, hybrid capital, portfolio guarantees, squeezing our balance sheet with the loan-to-equity ratio. The IDA play, look at IDA. Every dollar we get from the richer countries for IDA, we leverage 4 times. In IBRD, I can do that 8 to 10 times. Why is that different? Because IDA has more grants and more concessional capital than IBRD does. I have to toggle these while doing this. Doing all this, last year, we put 120 billion to work in different countries. Roughly of the IDA, IBRD part, about 60-70% went to Africa. But money went to South Asia, money went to Southeast Asia, money went to Latin America and Central Asia. That's what we do. That's our allocation methodology.
Yeah. So that actually puts you, in your view, in a much stronger position to win the case for the bigger bank that the world is going to need in the future.
So IDA 21 replenishment is coming up at the end of this year. We have to work hard on getting that to be a robust replenishment, because the reality of the challenges facing us, as Kristalina described, are much more than we think we can deal with otherwise. IDA is critical. Let me give you one example. Of the 4 countries going through the G20 Common Framework on Debt, Ethiopia, Chad, Ghana, and Zambia, we are the only ones who are giving them net positive flows since the day they entered the common framework. We have put 18 billion to work in these 4 countries, 9 billion of which is net positive. 8 billion out of the 18 is grants, pure grants, and the rest is deeply concessional. If IDA was not to exist, we couldn't get this done. And so we have to ensure that IDA gets the support it deserves in this coming December. That's why I've got this thing on fire of getting the better bank organized, because the bigger bank issues, IDA starting, is in December.
Yeah, perfect. And Kristalina, obviously huge policy creativity in your first term, special drawing rights, rechanneling, 50% quota increase, Resilience and Sustainability Trust, Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust. Just been appointed for a second term. What are the sort of big moves?
Okay.
What comes next?
Yep. Big and better things. But let me, before I get to, I want to answer this seriously. Before I get to this answer, though, thank you for your good wishes for my second term. I want to thank all the in the membership that are supporting me, and say it as clearly as I can. I do not take that support for granted. My intention is to work very hard for it every single day. And what does it translate in terms of our ambition at the IMF in terms of serving our membership? Given what we see in the data, the next couple of years will be most difficult for low-income countries and vulnerable, more fragile middle-income countries. And therefore, we must secure the financial capacity and the focus of our staff for these countries. For us at the fund, we are in a very good position today to seek to strengthen this capacity. Why? Because we have been managing our revenues responsibly. Just this week, the week of the spring meetings, I expect that we would reach our target for the so-called precautionary balances, 25 billion SDRs. They are buffering us if there is trouble in the world economy and any of our members are not able to serve their debt to us. God forbid. When we generate income above this 25 billion, then the question is, what do we do with this income? And we are going to have a very important conversation over the next 6 months, reflecting on the needs of our membership. For some that have been borrowing and are continuing to borrow from the fund at a very high levels, think of Egypt, Ukraine, Argentina, Ecuador. These are countries that today are paying the fund, yes, less than market, but because interest rates are so high, what they have to pay to the fund is also high. Can we do better in our terms for them? Can we use some of the income we generate to bring the membership around some agreement that, provided they can legislatively do it, that some of it goes into our subsidy account for PRGT? Why? Because if the fund can generate that kind of income flow, that would mean that there would be more, other things equal, to provide to IDA. So if we can support indirectly IDA, why not? And of course, we are in a more shock-prone world. So how we can use some of this income to continue to build the financial strength of the fund? So this is one very big question for us. Two, we all recognize that we are in a more fragmented world. And while I would appeal to all of us, to our common sense, to work towards a more integrated world economy, it is clear that we are going to see a bit more of that guaranteeing countries' security and interests with some shifts in trade patterns and shifts in financial flows. It's happening. How can we, in this world, build the strength of the IMF as an institution at the center of the global financial safety net? How can we make sure that the international monetary system is highly functional and delivering for countries? It's a very big question. Just to give you one example of the many aspects of this question, swap lines. There are countries that get their own domestic reserve positions strengthened because they rely on swap lines from major central banks, from the Fed, ECB, now People's Bank of China is more active. Can we think strategically of these swap lines in a way that the whole is bigger than the sum of individual parts? And what is our role? What exactly is the fund to do to give more confidence to countries? So that's another part where you would see the fund leading the way to strengthen the global financial safety net. And the three, I think, is the one where you would see the brotherhood, the sisterhood and brotherhood of us, fund and bank in action. We are very relevant to countries that are facing difficulties, whether it is debt restructuring, reprofiling, relief, or it is investing in stronger macroeconomic fundamentals. When the fund and the bank come together and we lead the rest of the international community, wonderful things happen. And we want to be to be remembered as being a inspiration for multilateralism because we deliver. If people don't see benefits in their lives because of the existence of our institutions, never mind how much we call for it, multilateralism will weaken. But if they see these benefits, if more kids go to school, if the health systems are more reliable, if the climate crisis is tamed, if growth is stronger, if jobs are more available, and we have contributed, we have done our part for it, then it would be easier for you to vote for us.
Exactly, that is true. That is and that indeed would be a renaissance of the Bretton Woods spirit. I'm conscious the clock is against us. Should we go to the floor and open up? Right, let's see some indications. I wonder, we're really honoured to have with us today Dr. Julia from Tanzania, who is not only the Speaker of the House, but is also the Chair of the Interparliamentary Union. Thank you so much for joining us. I wondered if you would do us the honour of the opening pitch, the opening question.
Okay. Thank you so much for giving me this first opportunity to speak. And in the interest of time, I'll try to be brief. Like you said, my name is Tulia Ackson. I'm the Speaker for the National Assembly of Tanzania, but I also serve as the President for the Interparliamentary Union. So I would like to first begin by congratulating the World Bank and IMF for this initiative that you have accepted to be part of, and also the chair is there with you, so we are happy that we can actually engage as parliamentarians by using this forum, and you're able to also hear what the parliamentarians say about the World Bank, but also IMF and its policies and all the reforms that you're doing. I'd also like to commend you for the reforms that you're doing now, and the readiness that you're ready to listen to the members of parliament of what they're going to say in the course of this day, but also through the forum, the ideas that they will have in terms of incorporating multilateralism. And you rightly said, as politicians, we are concerned sometimes about how multilateralism is working. And we have been suggesting reforms on the part of the United Nations, and it's so good today to have both of you here speak about the readiness to change. Now, I would like to address the issue of peace and security, because I understand many people in the room would like to take the floor, so I can't talk about everything. But as a president of the Interparliamentary Union, we would like to see more engagements from the World Bank and IMF in this context of how you're working in the area of peace and security. Why? Because, Mr. President of the World Bank, you rightly said, these issues that you are raising, they are intertwined. So when you talk about climate change, you talk about poverty, you talk about those things, you have to look at them in totality. Now, like I said, addressing the issue of peace and security, for these countries that are affected by the conflicts, by wars, it's not easy for them to be able to even talk about debts that we are going to talk in the course of the week. How are they going to be able to repay the debts? One, but even then, their people are poor already. These nations are poor already. They are ravaged. You talk about Sahel. Somebody here spoke about conflicts that are happening in the Middle East. As a multilateral society, we tend to always prioritize whatever comes up on the list. Like now, we are talking about what is happening in the Palestine, but also Israel. We also talk about Ukraine. Somebody mentioned about it here. But there are so many conflicts in the world. You talk about what is happening in the Sahel region. As politicians, we are concerned about what is happening in the Sahel. We would like to see democracy there. Why? Because these two institutions, that's the only way they will be able to talk about development in those countries. They'll be able to talk about poverty alleviation. Why? You can't talk about poverty alleviation, people are busy running for their lives. You can't talk about climate change, people are running for their lives. And you even mentioned about the fact that at a world level, we are trying to get rid of the use of fossil fuel. And you mentioned about the fact that this spring meetings is going to, one of the issues that you're going to address is energy in Africa. But when you talk about energy, what is it that we are going to do? Because some of these countries that are now advancing the issue of getting rid of fossil fuels, they developed through fossil fuel. It's not like you have to encourage countries to use fossil fuel, but you have to work out how they should get energy out of something else instead of fossil fuel. Otherwise, you have to allow them to use fossil fuel so that they reach there. Now, my issue is how can parliamentarians actually get to hear from you on the issue of flexibility of how you're going to assist these nations that are suffering from all the examples that I've given you, to be able to assist them in the innovative ways that they're going to use, be it climate change, be it peace and security, so that the two bodies are able to help these countries get out of poverty, their people get an education. I mean, there's so much to talk about, so I'll end there. Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Thank you so much. Great. So, RJ, we'll start with the really tough questions. I mean, we've obviously got a debt crisis now of unprecedented proportions. Your analysis says that half of those living in poverty will be living in countries bedeviled by conflict by 2025. How does the bank and the fund now work together to deliver that kind of flexibility that allows for the medium-term pathways that Kristalina talked about when it comes to fiscal consolidation?
First of all, Madam Speaker, thank you for your passion on the topic. When I was talking about debt, I mentioned that those 4 countries that are going through the G20 Common Framework, we're the institution that gave that money in grant, which is 0 payback, no debt, no interest. The rest of it is deeply concessional. It is for those 4 countries. If you speak to members of those 4 countries here, they know this to be true for a fact. The problem is there are other countries going through this as well. And what we are trying to stay focused on is net positive flows to those countries, so that they aren't in a position where they're paying back more than what they can afford to. I do think on energy, I don't want to preempt what we're going to say, but you're going to be pleasantly surprised by our experience in your own country, Tanzania, and in Rwanda, where we've actually done great work on distributed as well as connected to the grid renewable energy systems. That's what we're focusing on delivering. By 2030, it will be, that 600 million people in the continent are without power. We're talking about changing the needle dramatically by 2030, not by 20 million and 50 million people. I'm talking about hundreds of millions. So I hope that I will be able to give you, over the coming days, an idea of how we're going to get there through the right kind of renewable energy, both distributed off-grid, but also connected to the grids. This is going to need work. It will need work to also manage transmission lines. It will need work to make the utilities more capable. None of this is easy, but together we can do a great deal on both of those. For example, if governments need money to help with transmission and utility work, that's a place where the IMF, with its capabilities, can be very constructive to provide fiscal capability and capacity to those same countries where we are trying to work on specific projects to connect consumers to electricity. And together, therefore, 1 + 1 is equal to 3. That is the kind of thing that we're working on together. None of this is easy. None of it is simple, but they're actually tangible answers to what you're looking for.
Perfect. Kristalina, what would you add?
It is really the most concerning trend that conflicts, violence persist, spread, and the world is unfortunately incapable to handle multiple crises at the same time. So many of them fall off the radar screen. At the fund, we have done over the last years 3 things very important for us, how we serve these countries. 1, we adopted a new strategy on fragile and conflict-affected states. The strategy aims to, it is defining how we bring skills and what are the kinds of things we can do in these countries, how we work closer with the bank and other institutions, and how we increase our footprint. In other words, we have more resident representatives in these countries because they need the support the most. Second, we have created some time ago an instrument called Catastrophe Containment and Relief Trust. It allows us, when a country is in terrible trouble, to provide grants to this country if they have a loan with us, so they pay back with grant money. In other words, they don't have to choose between feeding their people and paying the IMF. We have used it actively during the pandemic. We would now need to work to replenish it and then make sure that for countries, for fragile states, for conflict-affected states, we have this instrument. 3, last year, our board took a very important decision to put in place policy for the fund to engage in countries with exceptional uncertainty affecting their prospects. So a country, we used to not be able to actually do anything in a country when a country is in a war. Now we can. There are a number of preconditions that have to be met, but we can. And it is really important that the fund doesn't shy away from countries when they are very often, for no fault of their own, falling in that category of conflict and violence. I want to say one thing about the future of peace and security. We know it, that development and peace are two sides of the same coin. The more we can do to support development, the better chances we have for peace. If I may add to that, the more women, like you, madam, the more women are in a position of authority, the better chances there is for peace. More women. And I love you all men, I love you dearly, but more women.
Right. So the only thing I want to add to this fragility piece is the statistic from the bank for the money, that portion of our IBRD money that's going into fragile conflict, violence countries is 28% of our footprint. And that's growing. So I think we're speaking with our efforts and our energy in these locations. One of the reasons why I mentioned about the jobs for young people is I believe that without that, our risk multiplies many more times in the coming years.
Perfect. Right,
Liam,
let's take some more questions.
Would you permit me to acknowledge a former Prime Minister that's in the House, if I'm seeing correctly, the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Alan Chastany, and he has his hand up.
Thank you so much. Hello.
Yes.
Let's just take a question from Ukraine, and then we might just take 2 at a time now, just to speed up a little bit. Okay. Ukraine, take a mic on the table in front of you. Press the button.
Hope it's worked.
It was working.
Yeah.
Just keep signs up. Yeah.
Today we are from Ukraine, and we are a country which on the more than 2 years in full-scale war, and we have IMF program, and it's one of the evidence for words which Mrs. Georgieva said. I want to come back to one of the story you mentioned in last year before, in previous spring meeting. You said that you was in Ukraine, you have their meetings with women's leaders, and one of the participants shared with you that if her husband will not pay taxes in Ukraine, she will divorce. So the good news, they still together, he is paying taxes, and we still working like economy. And all our taxes and customs revenues going for military spending. We have not enough money. But we still paying the pensions, salaries for school children. We are buying some social goods.
I'm going to bring you to the question just because we've got 15 minutes.
So just, actually I have another question. I have one short topic that I want to thank on behalf of people of Ukraine, to you, to World Bank, for your support, us in this hard time. We already have made the third successful review of our program, and only one small request, to bring more people from IMF now in Kyiv, in the office in Kyiv. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Right, Ukraine. Let me go to Senegal.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you kindly. Bakary Biquet Camara. I am a new parliamentarian, a young parliamentarian. Here is my question. It has to deal with what the World Bank president said, the 5 elements: individual, prosperity, planet, infrastructure, and delivery. Senegal will soon be using its own gas and oil, thus increasing its internal resources and income. We know that each democracy wants to reach a level of budgetary fiscal sovereignty. But given what has been said during COP28, what is the margin of maneuver today for your institutions in order to ensure a solid collaboration and the respect of global data for climate, knowing that our populations that have elected us won't understand the reluctance of leadership not to use fossil fuel? So it's a dilemma that we run into, us as politicians, in countries that soon will be using gas and oil or are already doing it. I thank you.
And thank you. Cameroon? If you can steal our mic on the table, that would be great.
Thank you, Liam, for giving me the floor. I'm very interested in the policy that are being discussed this week regarding energy. And I have 2 questions. The first, given the potential for energy infrastructure project to have significant environmental and social impact, what measures are being taken to ensure that projects supported by the World Bank and IMF adhere to better environment and social standards? The second question, how can parliamentarians can advocate for policy and investment that prioritize access to clean and affordable energy for all citizens, particularly marginalized communities in their respective countries, which support from international financial institutions like yours? Thank you very much.
Great. Kristalina, maybe I could just put this to you first. I mean, I think all of us here would acknowledge the extraordinary work that you've both put into helping in Ukraine. But a couple of questions here. One about managing the politics and the transition of climate change when you've got significant amounts of fossil fuel in your economy, a climate test almost for new financing, and this question of how parliamentarians engage in policy design is obviously a really big interest of all of us.
Let me just recognize what we heard from Ukraine. The economy is functioning despite the war in a way that is truly remarkable. Growth in Ukraine is around 5%, inflation fell below 5%, and tax to GDP collection 36%. So women stay married to their men. And I'm saying this to just make one simple point. Policies and institutions, but also the commitment to those policies and institutions matter everywhere. To your question, we, at the IMF, we regard climate change as a risk to macroeconomic and financial stability, and we regard climate action as an opportunity for boosting weak growth and creating green jobs. We are now integrating in our fiscal policies, in our monetary policies, and our financial sector policies, climate as it matters for macroeconomic financial stability, growth, and employment. What I want to say loud and clear is that the transition to clean energy, low carbon growth, and very important, climate resilient development of cities, of rural areas. This transition is upon us, and it is our duty as an organization to help you accelerate it, because time is not our friend. Talking about energy, what I aspire to see is not only rooftop energy and wind, but large-scale transformative renewable energy projects, like Rogan in Central Asia, in Tajikistan, like the long-dreamed by Africans Inga project. These are the things that, if we get them done, we provide energy, access to clean energy on scale, and we transform the growth path for countries. So my plea is that we think of climate action in this positive way. It's an opportunity, and then write on it as such. What concerns me very deeply is that we very quickly get into fighting over climate action and then finger pointing. And I can tell you from where I sit, I look at the world economy, the time for finger pointing has to be over, and the time for holding hands has to come.
Very good. RJ.
So let me just add two thoughts to it. The first one is on how parliamentarians can help with policies. One of the things that I did not cover in my earlier portion is that the amount of money that is required for all these various challenges, there is not enough money in multilateral bank balance sheets or even in the IMF's coffers or governments to cater to this. We have to get the private sector into some of this. One of the challenges around that is the fact that they will not come if policies and regulatory principles are not clear. The clearer we can make tariff policies, the policies to keep utilities liquid and capable of paying to those who generate energy, if we get all these things right, and even if we get some of them right in a country, we make it much easier for people to put their money to work in that country. One thing you can do with for a lot of us is to help with those policies and that clarity. You would be surprised how much of a difference it makes as compared to just subsidies or support from multilateral institutions. It is a big opener. I spent my career in the private sector before coming here. I've always been interested in development. That's why I was focused on financial inclusion in my prior life in MasterCard. But you will find each time I argued for policy clarity, regulatory clarity. It makes a big difference to investment coming in. To the point about gas, it is true that the World Bank basically for the last so many years has been financing 90% of what we've done is renewables, and only the 10% has something to do with gas. But where we have financed gas is where it is an integral part of a transition process in that country's future. And I think there we have done so, both in Central Asia and other places. I do not know enough, sir, about your specific plans and proposals in Senegal, but you should rest assured we will engage on those to see whether there is a way forward there. But remember, 90% of what we do has been going to renewables. This big, ambitious target we are speaking to includes countries in Western and Central and Eastern parts of Africa. We're very focused on getting hundreds of millions of people into renewable energy by 2030, both through larger projects where ESF management or environmental factor management becomes far more critical, but also through distributed solar and wind energy, where we can prove the success of what we have been doing in a number of countries in Africa.
And this is where the knowledge bank actually is going to be supremely important. This is where the
knowledge bank is critical.
Right, 20-second questions. 20-second questions. Egypt, Cameroon, Suriname.
St. Lucia.
Hi. Okay. Thank you, Liam. I want to ask a question regarding Egypt. As you may know, Egypt is vulnerable for climate change. and it particularly impacts the agriculture sector, and along with the scarcity of water, which put our population, which is around 110 million people, at risk for food security. I was wondering, or I can say I was hoping to see, because my hopes were raised when the World Bank initiated a very progressive initiative when you said that we are going to pause loans on islands that face natural disasters. So my question is, can we hope to see another progressive initiative for suspending, like temporary, for certain time, the debt service, so governments can use the funding and the budget to adapt for the climate risks and protect their own citizens from food security risks? Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Let me go to Uganda. Just very, very briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, how is World Bank and IMF assisting parliamentarians to hold their governments accountable so that they can save the countries from this debt burden, wastage, and mismanagement of public resources?
Perfect, thank you. And we're going to go to St. Lucia now for our final question.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to really personally thank Christina, because their words were action. During COVID, our income in our country went from $110 million a month to $55 million. So when you paid salaries of $44 million, you paid debt of $30 million and operating costs of $30 million, and your operating costs went up because of all the overtime. Within less than 2 months, we were able to get finances in to help solve the problem, and I know you did it for many other islands. So I just want to say thank you for first-hand testimony. The second thing I want to do is really two statements.
Just really briefly, because we've got...
Yeah, very, very, very briefly. The comment about the private sector is absolutely right. The private sector revenues or monies are substantially bigger than what we have in all our countries. Many countries, developing countries in the world, there are thousands of multinational companies that have bigger balance sheets than we have GDPs. In trying to bring them to the table, there are two issues that come to hand. One is democracy and capitalism, and they're in direct conflict with that money. And when I hear America lament the fact that 85% of its medications are being manufactured outside of America, or 85% of the smart chips are being manufactured in America, and now want to have nationalism policies, imagine us small countries, we're being extracted upon and we really need your help. And in the area of democracy, now that I'm in opposition, I've really recognized how in our parliamentary systems, the opposition who are supposed to provide a check and balance are not being given the leverage to do that. And I would certainly like to think that the World Bank and the IMF will play a more critical role in making sure that the rules of our democracies are actually being implemented. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm sorry we're out of time now, but hold on to the questions because there will be opportunities to take them and get answers over the course of the week. RJ, do you want to just maybe pick up on private sector and on good governance? So you've built a new lab that brings together private sector potential investors. That's beginning to make some progress. But governance too is something that the bank is championing.
So the private sector part, what we're trying to do is we've concluded with this lab some initial conclusions. The first one is what I was discussing earlier in response on the regulatory policy. It comes across from every private sector investor, give me clarity on regulatory policy, and that removes a great deal of the resistance to invest. But the second one comes from political risk guarantees, where what we have done is we're taking the guarantee organizations across the bank, putting them together in one place, simplifying access so you can get clarity of that, and hopefully trebling our guarantee issuance over the coming years from the current $7 billion to $20 billion, again to help the private sector vault over that issue. The third big issue they have is around foreign exchange. if they're investing in hard currencies like dollars and yen and pounds and euros, but they're getting paid in local currency in projects that have 20 and 30-year implications, that's an exposure risk that they cannot fathom. Again, there we're trying to think through, could we create multi-layered risk systems where the investor absorbs the first level of risk, the local government absorbs some, and then the bank can step in to take some of that tail risk that nobody else could do and convert that into a 50-year, essentially very deeply concessional loan to that country. So you amortize the cost of that risk over a very long period at a very small cost. Things of that nature. And then the last part has to do with trying to figure out a way to originate to distribute so we can release the private sector's balance sheet and enable insurers and people like BlackRock and pension funds to find scalable environmental, social investments that they believe they can then put money into. So there's a series of work going on with the private sector. The reality is the private sector also needs rules of governance and guidance to make sure that they stay in their swim lane. And I think that's where regulatory policy starts from. I would focus on that quite a bit.
Perfect. Thank you. Kristalina.
I want to answer the question on how we can help parliamentarians by making sure that your voice is heard, that you are actively consulted when we have engagements. For the fund, every single year, we go to almost all countries. Some we do on 2-year interval. And then we take the pulse of the economy, the vital signs of the economy. And then we bring this as policy recommendations. Your voice, we always consult you. We always think how the legislature can help the country build strong fundamentals for the future. I want to finish with the following. You mentioned my speech in Cambridge. The inspiration for this speech was an essay that John Maynard Keynes wrote in 1930. 1930, the midst of the Depression. And Keynes predicted that in 100 years from that time, the world would be much better off and it would be some 8 times wealthier. What happened? In 100 years' time, the world is 8 times wealthier. I took this because we are now in this time when it is so easy to become pessimistic with all the turbulence around us. But the forces of technology, when put for good, combined with accumulation and allocation of capital where it would make a difference, they can make our world 9 times wealthier in 100 years' time. The choices we make today really matter for the future of our children and for the future of our grandchildren. And what I want to call on you is, please, in your work at home and when you're here, advocate for us to make the right policy choices.
Excellent.
Thank you.
That is a wonderful note amidst a world of fear to end on a wonderful vision of hope. Marlene, that's been a great discussion.
What an amazing discussion. I think listening, I can give testimony to the fact that the words have been translated into actions from the bank and the fund in the improvements made. The only thing, William, I'm saying.
I get called much worse, don't I?
You get called. You know, a session like this will require some more time going forward. And I know that your schedules are really tight, but these are the bosses. The ministers of finance and the governors of the central bank are the representatives. Critical to both sides is better engagement for better understanding. And I think if the lives of the people being served are not improved tangibly to enable us to get the better yields in productivity, in growth, leading to the jobs and everything else, we will have to pause and rethink. So listening to what is asked for and what you're also asking for, I wonder whether you could strongly suggest to the country reps that engaging the parliamentarians be mandatory, or if not mandatory, be a requirement. Two reasons: to update them, Parliament as a group, on the engagements in their member countries, and also to tell what is to come and how parliamentarians themselves can ask better questions and engage. So the engagement of the country reps, and also whether it could be a soft condition in the programs with our countries that a report from the parliament preceded by parliamentary discussion be part of the feedback. No, I bear in mind that there may be practical challenges, because sometimes it comes down to short time to take action and decisions have to be taken in the executive. But we, the people, see the people and know what impacts the people. And at the end of the day, every action taken is to bring improvement to the lives. So I want to commend the bank and to express our delight that both of you have demonstrated through what you've said, not only in the what, but the how, that there is a better understanding for the need for better outputs and better impact. And that the bank is engaging and the fund, and you're making changes where it matters most. We look forward to speedier decisions, simpler processes in ensuring that the programs and the projects can unlock faster. And then, the country-specific analysis and advice is welcome, not just the global setting. And I ask parliamentarians to take advantage of that. Better payment terms, some would say, I want to shout hallelujah. Because when people are told that we have to pay back, so it's limited space, policy space for the programs, limited policy space for the spend that impact the people, then it causes unrest. That is not healthy for the democracy. So I like the global safety net that the IMF is seeking to become, and that you will not shy away from the countries in conflict and many times leave the elephants in the room ignored. Elephants are big, they shouldn't be ignored. So, what can I say? On behalf of the group, let me thank you both. Let me thank you for your dynamic leadership, and may your next term bring you all the success that will inure to the success of our people. Thank you, Ajay. And please invest a little more in the parliamentary network to ensure that we can engage in the way we should.
Thank you so much, and that concludes this session. Please join us in saying a huge thank you to the Managing Director and to the President.
but we have